All right. I think we're live now. Let me double check.
Yeah.
Good? All right. Let's get this thing started. So, welcome to the Nvidia debate between myself, a bear, Greg, and my friend Carl, whose camera is currently spinning wheels.
Sorry, I was frozen. I'm trying to get it back going, but thank you for having me here today.
Yeah, no problem. So, Nvidia just did their stock split 10-1 today, and in my opinion, I think that they are trying to pump the stock in any way that they can, and this 10-1 split is just another method in order for them to do it. You saw the same thing kind of happening with Tesla a couple years back when they were doing the S&P inclusion. And there's definitely some validity to the stock being valued the way that it is, but I think a large part of it is just hype. You here with us, Carl?
Yes. So you want me to go ahead and speak on the stock split right now?
Yeah. What do you think of it?
So I think Nvidia is only trying to further grasp the attention of retail investors and it just overall small individual investors, because all it does is it brings down, the entry fee in order to play options to get on Nvidia with this 10-1 split. It also will increase the volume naturally with there being so many more shares added without, affecting the valuation of the company. And I think it's a good sign. I think Nvidia really wants it to be a company that can be owned by just about anybody in the world. And for them to be doing this 10-1 stock split, I think that really shows the initiative and the push forward to help out with retail support for their company as well.
Well, there's more reasons than just getting retail in, but that's a good point. I was actually thinking about buying puts now that the stock price is cheap enough to where I can afford to. I was looking at puts before that were like probably at least 30% out of the money for a couple months out, and they easily cost you a few grand. So it's definitely a play. But one of the biggest reasons companies do stock splits is so their employees can get in. Right. So you have employee stock compensation programs, and let's say you're only making $50,000 a year at NVIDIA. This is something that was very common with Tesla a couple years back, where the factory workers were only making like 40, 50 grand a year. They kept doing the stock splits. That way they could actually purchase in. Because if you're only getting, say, I don't know, $4,000 a month paycheck, you can only buy like 3 shares of Tesla if it's trading at like 1,500. So this will allow employees to use up more of their income because of the smaller share price now. So it's kind of a two-part, but yeah, I do think that the stock split should allow for more options trading. To me, I would see it more as a bearish sign just because the stock is so overinflated compared to, a year ago.
Well, that's interesting you say it's overinflated from a year ago, because I just wanted to point out just the revenue growth year over year that NVIDIA has had. And I know you mentioned GAAP earnings and diluted earnings per share.
Yeah.
And with their diluted earnings per share, they're up over 629% year over year from quarter one.
Is that a gap diluted?
Yes, that is pulled from NVIDIA.
I don't think I've seen that number. So the number that I was looking at was their gap diluted shares over the past 2 years, which is only up by 35%. And the revenue definitely has seen a huge surge. It's up, I think, like triple or quadruple over the past 2 years. But if their gap diluted earnings is only up 35%, to me that signals that they're losing margins, which as you grow a company, you tend to lose margins just like we saw with Tesla. But that means,
And that makes sense.
yeah, good.
But also with NVIDIA, see, the NVIDIA now has the same likeness as Apple, right? They're a $3 trillion company. They're one of the most valuable in the world. When you think of AI, you think of NVIDIA. When you think of GPUs, you think of NVIDIA. These are just keys to just the notoriety that they've gained and their early dominance and their expansion. And they have a very strong ecosystem within their financial balance. Like they
Yep.
don't just make all their money in one sector. They're very diverse, and they have a ton of investments going to other companies as well, and for cloud computing. It just depends on what they want to do, but they have the money for it. So
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they definitely came up with a lot of cash, but to me, they're coming up with a lot of cash in a way that I wouldn't want as a shareholder. So over the past 5-6 months since January, they have filed 19 Form 144s, which is when the company is selling shares, basically diluting shareholders at this point. And they have filed again 19 Form 144s for a total of 1.4 million shares. I haven't looked at the not open interest. I keep thinking of options trading, but the shares outstanding and how much that has diluted shareholders. Let me see if I can find Nvidia's shares outstanding. So as of, let's see, I'm seeing from Tip Ranks, they have 2.5 billion shares available on the public market, and they've sold 1.4 million. So it's not a huge amount, but they have shown continuous dilution of shareholders over the past 2 years. I mean, you can look just at their diluted earnings per share and how much that has gone up in comparison to non-diluted shares.
yeah, I think you bring a great point with that. And like I mentioned earlier, the probably one of the most main reasons why Nvidia is selling their own stock is just for liquidation and for cash. Just to
Mm-hmm.
move stuff around if they need to, and being able to sell their own stock just helps them do that. It's just the easiest way for them to get money or get their hands on money that they don't already have, but they know
Yeah.
they do have.
Yeah.
And so I don't see it as a bad thing, because also in August of 2023, Nvidia said that they were going to buy back over $25 billion of its own shares.
Yeah. So they did do the buy. From what I've seen, they did a lot of buybacks last year. But the reasoning behind the buybacks that they were doing was to offset the dilution that they were creating whenever they were doing the employee stock compensation programs. So one way that companies can increase their earnings per share, when it comes to non-GAAP at least, you can't do the same with GAAP, but you can do employee stock compensation, and that raises your non-GAAP because it's a non-cash expense, essentially. So whenever you're issuing all of these options, you're allowing basically new shares to be created that are being allocated towards all these employees, which has been a large part of the dilution that they've created over the past couple of years. Let me see if I can pull the link for this. Doesn't look like anybody has it right now. Okay.
Well, and one thing to note with buybacks, right? So I think Nvidia is being aggressive with the buybacks because they believe, it's a sign that they know that their own stock is undervalued. And with their accelerated growth, they'll continue to do so on great earnings and performances.
Yeah.
And their revenue increases quarter over quarter, which helps shareholders as well. Um, and NVIDIA, just in this last year, spent over 27% of their revenue on research and development last year with rival chip companies, which is insane, I think. Just to spend a quarter of your revenue alone on research and development for the future is a very ambitious but trailblazing thing to do as a company.
So they definitely done their shareholders a good service in setting a moat, basically. So they've set their company apart from the competition through their software. Now, I'm not a huge chip nerd, don't know a ton. I just know enough to be dangerous, as with basically anything. So, from what I understand, CUDA is their biggest advantage, which is the software programming language for their chips, which sounds great on the surface, but I'm curious, I guess, if software is really the limiting factor, or could it be hardware? If you can bring down the size of a chip, I think that's more valuable than having this giant RTX 4080. Just because you can put it in smaller form factors, like you could put it on an iPhone, you could put it in eyewear at some point would be my vision that I have, putting it into augmented reality glasses and stuff. I think that has a lot more value than these giant form factors that you have. Now, obviously, if you're a Bitcoin miner, which is what they're very popular with right now, or if you're working in artificial intelligence, you don't need that smaller form factor. But the way that I see it is, it's kind of like, this is a hyperbole, but it's kind of like computers back in the 1970s versus having taking up entire rooms versus having a computer in the palm of your hand today.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think, with the development and with their graphics cards, the 40 series, and the one of the big headlines was, wow, these cards are huge and they don't even fit into normal computer cases anymore because of just the raw size of these cards alone
Yeah.
with all the other computer parts that they have to put in. But I really think that it's not a negative for their products to not be so small form factor yet, right? Nobody's wanting a RTX 4090 in their iPhone right now because they're not going to go, play Call of Duty on their phone when they get home from school or whatever.
Yeah.
So I think that kind of technology of just micro sizing their own technology is definitely years down the road, and I definitely don't think that's something that they're very focused on. It's more of just innovation of what is out there to be discovered with AI and software and cloud computing, whatever it may be. And that's why they're putting so much money into it, because they know that there's so much more money to be made.
Right. Yeah, but there's a lot of money to be made in AI and crypto. I am more bullish on crypto than I am in AI, just because I think that we need a new currency that isn't the US dollar because of how the Federal Reserve has been handling it. Won't get too deep into that topic, but artificial intelligence, there's definitely some merit to it, but in my opinion, artificial intelligence is a bit overhyped, and I think a lot of people can kind of agree with the sentiment, to where all the AI products that are available to the public market right now have been around for the past 10 years. Like, I remember back in high school, I used to talk with this little chat bot. I forget what the name of it was. It was really dumb, obviously, because it was, God, how long has it been since I was in high school? 10 years? Yeah, 10, 11, something like that. I'm dating myself. But anyway, yeah, so these chatbots have been around for a while now. They're just new and improved, have a different name to them. You look at the image generation, which that's nothing new either. There was a website called thispersondoesn'texist.com to where you can create somebody's face, a person that doesn't exist. So all this image creation has been around for a very long time. Sora, I think from OpenAI video creation, that I mean, as a video creator myself, that's pretty revolutionary. But we've had video creators in the past, albeit very poor ones. I don't have any clips of it, but like there was some of Will Smith eating like spaghetti or something really weird. But yeah, we've seen pretty big improvements, but at the same time, these technologies have been around for a while, and I'm not sure if that really justifies the valuation they're getting.
Yeah, I with AI, I'm not really too bullish on AI as of yet. I think a lot of the things that are around now have been around to some degree, whether
Mm.
it be just a little less intelligent than what it is now. But I also think AI is, an avenue to creativity. Like when people have writer's block or you're trying to
Yep.
think of a movie
Yep.
or just something like that. Like just a machine like that could plug in so many ideas and just create so many other things to base one idea off of, just off that alone, like a creative standpoint. It's like that could be a huge impact for a market that is so saturated already with content material, because
Mm-hmm.
we've all seen the same war movies over and over and
Yeah.
whatnot. There could be some application there with that, for artists or
Mm.
people that just create
Yeah.
more than just to operate with AI.
Well, as a creator myself and making all the YouTube videos that I do, I think that it's definitely been a huge tool in helping create like educational videos. It can be very valuable there. But in my opinion, if you want to be a good content creator, you have to be a storyteller. Um, that's what people can relate to. People aren't going to relate to me just going on about um, call options, put options, the Greeks. People will just get bored with that and they'll leave, right? But if I can tell a story instead, be like, hey, I made X amount with this call option. This was my thesis behind it. And basically giving people the shovel instead of the gold, I think that's a lot more valuable. Storytelling. And I don't think that AI will be able to do that. But it can definitely create, I guess, the framework for a video. And then you can add your story on top of it. I do see the value there.
Absolutely. Another thing I was going to mention with NVIDIA recently. So this just to put in comparison how much of an advantage they have right now over their competitors. So
Mm.
two of NVIDIA's HGX computers with Hopper GPUs that cost $500,000 can replace 1,000 nodes of CPU servers that cost $10 million dollars for AI, scientific computing, data processing, and workloads. Just that drop off of what is now considered obsolete tech to what Nvidia has to provide, and just the sheer discount you get it at is it can't be beat right now. I don't think there's any competitor with the ambition, the cash balance, the investments, the research that can really challenge Nvidia's efficiency, their quality, and their overall moat in expansion of all diversification in all areas that they can really dip their fingers into.
Yeah. Yeah, again, they definitely have a moat when it comes to their technology and its efficiency in comparison to AMD and who are the other names like Marvel. Marvel's really really behind, but at some point in the future, people will recognize, hey, there's a lot of profit in this, and they will spend, if they have enough cash, they will spend the money on R&D in order to catch up. You see the same things happening right now with Tesla, to where they're, yes, they are ahead of the game in terms of battery technology, but from my talks um, with somebody that I work with in the industry, there's a new battery technology that's in a lab right now, uh, not in full production yet, but there is a battery that can go from 0 to 90% in 5 minutes. So just like research facilities and other companies are giving Tesla a run for their money now, I think the same thing will happen to Nvidia, maybe 3, 5, maybe even as long as 10 years down the road. It could take a while for the competition to catch up, but at some point I think that they will.
And we'll see about that. I could see it going either way. On April 25th, Microsoft said that the company wasn't even able to meet AI cloud services, which is
Mm-hmm.
crazy. I mean, I think Nvidia looks at that and they just see such an open market, right? Like there's really no one with their foot completely down yet, and it's just a arms race to really
Yeah.
secure that market share. And that's why Nvidia is being so aggressive right now with selling stock and doing the stock split, making sure people can be shareholders, making them believe in the company because they're doing so much in order to only get their price higher at the end of the day because they believe that they can still turn over more revenue, still turn over more profit,
Mm-hmm.
and have more sales.
Yeah.
And I think it's very good for bulls, and I think that's a very telltale sign for everyone involved.
So, Too Honest says, great stock, better price coming for the Bears, but bull run will follow afterward, which I could see that playing out maybe for the next couple of years, similar to how Tesla saw the huge run back between 2020 basically is when it started, and then it ended in 2023. The good thing about Nvidia that I will say is that they don't have, might get a little bit of pushback for this, but they don't have a maniac at the helm, which I think Elon has done a great disservice to Tesla shareholders. As a shareholder myself, I think he has done a great disservice too. I think that Jensen Huang, though, I think he's a little bit more in tune with the shareholders to where he's not going to burn that bridge, as Elon Musk did.
Yeah, and I think with that, the CEO of a company, or just the face of the company, really can affect investors a lot of the time because like Elon's a very public person, he's
Yeah,
always on Twitter,
yeah,
he's always responding to things. I don't really think you see Jensen Huang in that same light of just going on social media and just typing whatever because he's got bigger things to worry about than
yeah,
just
right,
spitting dumb polls or unbanning Trump from Twitter and starting a whole ruckus because of it.
yeah.
So I think Jensen Huang really stays away from a political light that maybe Elon Musk did not shine away from and stayed in more than investors would have liked him to with them losing money based off of how Tesla was and how it was affected with Twitter and Elon
Mm.
just being Elon really.
But I think that something that I see is very common is in America, at least, when people get a lot of money, they seek power. You see it all the time in politics, right? And how they try to shift public perception. You see Elon trying to push the vote more towards Trump. I'm not for or against Trump. I hate both politicians, actually, that are running in the race. But regardless, when people have power, I think that they start to abuse it. So I wonder if maybe that could be the case for Jensen a few years down the line, to where he's trying to start manipulating public opinions, just as Elon did. I'm not sure about that.
I don't think he's there as a Trojan horse for investors to just try to hook them on and take them on a ride just so they can burn all the investors and get all their money at the
Yeah.
top. I think he's a really good face of the company. Whenever you see him out there for the earnings and when he's talking to shareholders, he does a great job. And
Yeah.
I think it really puts confidence back into the investors too when they just see someone kill it every time. and just announce crazy numbers of revenue and forecast shatters every quarter. Basically, now it
Yeah.
seems.
Yeah, he's definitely a rock star right now. I'll give him that. I think both him and what's her name from AMD? Can't remember her name off the top of
Oh,
it.
I
Yeah,
don't
Lisa
know.
Su. Yeah, Lisa
Yeah.
Su. Both of them are very good CEOs in terms of public perception, very well received by their shareholders as well as the general public. And when you're comparing them to somebody like Musk, who's a little bit out there, a little bit outspoken, they're more reserved, which I think is beneficial to shareholders. But
Yeah, and I think when you're building rocket ships, you get a little bit of an ego involved. So,
yeah, the rocket can be a symbolism for something else. All right. So, a couple other points I wanted to touch on. So, we talked about the share buybacks of Form 144s. Form 4s. Jensen Huang selling $700 million of his stock. A lot of people have talked in my comments saying that, oh, he's just taking profits. You should take profits. And I agree with that. If I was up, God knows how much he's up on the shares that he has. Millions of percentages, I'm sure. I would be taking profits too, but you look at that on top of all the other insiders that have been selling. There's been 13 Form 4s just in the past 2 weeks, actually. So in the past 2 weeks alone, there have been 13 Form 4s for a total of 124,000 shares sold by insiders, not in, at least from my understanding, not including Jensen Huang's recent selling. So how do you feel that about all the insiders cashing out right now? Meanwhile, retail traders are buying in.
I see it as two sides of a sword because the company is doing one thing and then the big wigs are doing another. They're taking their money. They might be diversifying it. They might be going to buy a beach property. Who really cares what they do
Yeah.
with their money? All they know is they got their money because
Right.
they wanted it at that time.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, the company is doing things, I think, really to partially maybe offset all of this selling that's going on internally in Nvidia between the buybacks and just investing to make sure that they keep pumping out these great quarters because they don't want to they don't want to sell the stock and then next quarter hits, it's a total mess, and then the stock's in the gutter, and they
Yeah.
could lose a crazy amount of market cap if they had a bad quarter coming up, if they just had a reversal. So I could see him losing, point like a quarter or a half of $1 trillion on a bad quarter. And I think that Nvidia knows what their future looks like. So for them to sell shares now isn't really a panic button or an alarm
Mm.
going off in their heads either.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like I said, if you're up millions of percents, I would be taking profits too, but it's just very strange that almost, I mean, these 4M4s have come from multiple parties. It just wasn't Jensen Huang. It was a lot of other people. Somebody is saying, Rise Up Y'all is saying that my mic is on low. So let me try to see if I can pull it up. I'll probably just have to be closer to my mouth, which that's all right. But yeah. So my main concern would be that it's multiple parties selling rather than just one person that's cashing out. If I'm an
Well, it's
investor,
because
I
multiple
wouldn't
people
want to
have a
see
lot of
that.
money now.
Yeah, that's true.
They all have a probably a pretty big stake in Nvidia, and
Yeah.
they see what their bank account balance could look like if they just click the sell button real quick. And I'm
Mm,
sure that doesn't scare them.
yeah. Well, it's a little bit more complicated than just hitting the sell button for them. They have to schedule it
Yeah,
ahead of time.
there's
I think you have to schedule it a quarter ahead of time or something like that. I forget exactly what the timeline is, but I don't know. To me, it all just seems, even if they do have to schedule it 3 months ahead of time, I'm sure that there's somebody that's kind of planning all of this like 6 months ahead of time, 12 months ahead of time, maybe even 2 years ahead of time to where, oh yeah, we're gonna have this stock split at this time, and then before that we're going to cash out on some of our shares. I think that it's a lot more planned than people perceive it to be.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to get your opinion on, Greg,
Yeah,
is with the buybacks. So I
hmm
know you think it's an infinite gamma squeeze when Nvidia is doing their stock
yeah,
buybacks, but I wanted to mention a couple other mega cap companies with even bigger buybacks this year.
hmm
Apple is at 90 billion,
hmm
Google is at 70 billion, and then Meta is at 40 billion.
right.
So if Nvidia is doing these at if they're doing a smaller portion of buyback, but yet their stock is on such a hot run, why aren't Apple and Google and Meta, following the same suit if they have AI influence in that same market share, but are even doing bigger buybacks?
Well, Apple hasn't done anything in terms of artificial intelligence, from what I've seen, at least from the public perception. They might be working on something under the hood, but so I think the reason why we've seen the parabolic rise in Nvidia versus Apple, I think that they're using non-traditional methods. So, like I've been talking in a couple of my videos, there's another YouTuber, I forget what his name is at the moment, but he was saying that there's this potential that Nvidia has been buying call options and selling puts instead of buying actual shares of the company with their buyback program and the money that's allocated towards it, which it's not illegal by any means. The SEC actually allows for this, but there is a lack of transparency that they're still working on right now. They're writing rules and regulations around this at the moment. But right now, there's no requirement for them to state, we sold this many puts at this strike price with this expiration date, or we bought this many calls at this strike price with this expiration date. They're not required to disclose that, because supposedly if they did, that would be market manipulation, because then everybody else is going to buy into $1,000 calls expiring, God knows, like last week or something like that, right? So they can't
Yeah.
technically do that. But I was looking into how much money they had allocated towards their share buyback program for Q1 2024. So this year. They stated as Q1 2025, but anyway, they authorized 14.5 billion for share buybacks for Q1 2024, but they only used $8 billion for actual share repurchases. So my question would be, where did the other $6.5 billion go? Or did they just allocate it somewhere else?
I just think it was simple as just being allocated somewhere else. Like I said, they spend over a quarter of revenue alone on investments and research, and they're already, when they release a graphics card, right? When they release the 40 series cards, they're already in the lab developing the 50 series cards to be even more powerful than the most powerful cards on the market, right? Because it's an arms race. You always want to be better than your competitors, and it's always great for consumers because then you get the benefit of producer competition, right? And so I think it really helps all aspects of the business, between, like, from top to bottom, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because as consumers, we get the best cards, maybe not the best prices, but
Yeah.
sometimes they're justified, sometimes they're not.
Yeah.
It just depends on new technology. And at the same time, Nvidia is forcing all of these other companies to really step it up to the next level, because they're just saying, hey, like, we're not taking our foot off the gas. Like, you see our numbers, you see our
Right.
investments, you
Right.
see where we're headed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think they've made a lot of good investments. I don't know if they would, if you are allowed to get away with it, if there's no rules and regulations against it, though, in my opinion, like, why wouldn't you take advantage of that? That would be my thought process if I
Well,
were the head of
yeah.
Nvidia. Like, if I can cause my stock to go up 200, 300% in a short amount of time, why wouldn't I? That's a benefit to the shareholders at the end of the day. The only risk there would be a fiduciary, their fiduciary duty to give shareholders the best price on the buybacks. And if they're buying out of the money calls, they're not getting the best price for it, one. And two, the potential of the options expiring out of the money. So if your options expire out of the money, that would be cash that just gets burned. And they probably have entire like trading divisions, like derivative trading divisions, that kind of manage the portfolio. But even then, that's probably costing the company millions of dollars.
Yeah, if they are selling puts and buying calls, it just goes to show that they're putting their money where their mouth is, leveraging it, right? Because
Yeah.
they want to get, I guess, the most value rather than just straight up buying shares. So
Yeah.
I think that's just another sign just to believe in Nvidia from where they are operating from an internal standpoint.
I could see that, but I also see it as a form of market manipulation. If you are the biggest buyer of call options and you are forcing the market makers to buy up shares to hedge their positions, then they, again, like you basically create an infinite gamma squeeze. You are the biggest buyer of call options or selling put options. You are the biggest player in the game. So they're the ultimate whale in this case.
Yeah, I was going to say there's a whale effect for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. And then you also have another whale by the name of Nancy Pelosi, who has call options expiring at the end of the year. So that all kind of seems to play in together. But
Telltale sign, yes.
yeah. So one more thing after that I wanted to talk about was the CoreWeave deal. So if y'all don't know, CoreWeave is a basically an online GPU provider, cloud-based GPU provider. And CoreWeave did a deal with Nvidia back in 2023 that allowed for CoreWeave to borrow money in order to buy Nvidia's newest chips. I think the H100s. Don't quote me on it, but they used debt financing to buy the new chips, and the debt that they used was collateralized by Nvidia's old chips. I think this was a report by Reuters about a year ago. But if that's true, basically that creates a like infinite money glitch. Essentially, if I can borrow money from Nvidia's old chips to buy Nvidia's new chips, it's kind of creating your own currency.
Yeah, they do have a little bit of a bank structure going on with other companies, being
Yeah.
able to use all facets of income or monetary money exchange.
Mm-hmm.
But I think so. With CoreWave, I think it's a really good investment for Nvidia because cloud-based services are going to be so big, and right now CoreWave is valued at 19 billion,
Yeah.
and that's up
They're
over
trying to
7 billion
IPO.
just from a month ago.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're definitely going to IPO, and I think Nvidia knows that too, and they see just the extreme value of just propping up this company to be the one company to go to for cloud-based anything, right? Just to be the dominator of that space, because Nvidia will, eventually own probably a pretty significant stake in CoreWave once they IPO, and
Yeah.
they'll be getting a lot of revenue just off of that company operating on its own.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's one way to go about it. I think it's kind of a roundabout way in order to create a shell company, but we'll see. Too Honest says, "What do you guys use for the data that we are reciting?" So for all the financial information, I go to SEC.gov, the Edgar platform. So if I'm looking for Form 144s to see how many shares the company is selling, or Form 4s, how many shares insiders are selling, I'll get it from there. I was able to pull the diluted gap earnings, I believe, from the SEC forums, the Form 10Qs and 10Ks. And then this CoreWeave deal we're talking about right now, I pulled that data from a Reuters report again a couple years ago. And what's interesting, or I'll let you talk where you get your data, Carl.
Oh, okay. So for me, it's just kind of anywhere I can find it from like a reputable source on the internet. I'm not going to Wikipedia and looking up, financials of Nvidia. I'm pretty sure I used Yahoo Finance to get most of my numbers
Mm,
for their quarters performances,
right.
and then I actually did go to Nvidia itself because they publish everything on their own
Mm,
website, and you can find just about anything you want to on there.
yeah.
And so for the two NVIDIA HGX computers that cost the $500,000, that
Right.
compared to the $10 million, that was published by NVIDIA themselves. So a lot of this
Mm,
information is from the company that I'm reciting here today.
yeah. Okay. So going on that CoreWeave deal, you're talking about how they're planning to IPO, and that will be another way for Nvidia to make more revenue. To me, like I said, I see it as kind of a roundabout way to create a shell company because, at least in private equity investing, if you buy into a company, you get a say in what that company does. Basically, you get board seats into that company. And right now, CoreWeave is a private company planning to IPO 2025, I think was the date. So they're probably allocating board members, and you have Jensen Huang or whatever NVIDIA insider telling them, hey, this is what you should do, which, I mean, it's technically not illegal to do if you can invest. But to me, like I said, the way that I see it is like creating a shell company, which if you're the one that's financing them to buy new chips, if you're the one that's buying into the stock, into the upcoming IPO, I I see a huge tail risk in it and having possibly legal ramifications.
I mean, I just think they're just dedicated partners to each other. I don't think that they're in this just to manipulate all their money and just to circle it back through each other or whatever it may be. And I definitely do think that there's definitely going to be some board members, if not already, kind of giving out the blueprint and just
Mm.
mentoring the actual, core wave, higher ups that have been there from the beginning.
Yeah.
I see Nvidia as just like an angel investor, like because Nvidia didn't already have their own structure basically for cloud-based services, and they just saw this as an easy outlet into it without a lot of groundwork, and
Mm.
they could just really build up CoreWave just by giving them money, which from Nvidia that's an easy standpoint to do, and it'll
Yeah.
only pay back their investment once CoreWave IPOs, I believe.
Yeah. And I think it's a good thing for shareholders that they're basically creating a monopoly. Even if, it is illegal, it is good that they're basically diversifying themselves into new markets with cloud-based GPUs instead of their physical GPUs that they have now. It's just another revenue source that they can come up with. But you see a lot of crackdowns happening on big monopolies. You saw Apple with the getting rid of the iPhone jack, going to the USB-C now. Not sure if I can pull any other examples, but I think that eventually there has to be a crackdown on monopolies, and this happens every few years too, where they say they're going to crack down and they never do. But you see the discrepancy, from what I've been seeing, the discrepancy between the haves and have-nots. Small businesses right now are getting crushed because of the higher interest rates and because they're allowing these monopolies to do what they do with lobbyists. And to me, at some point, that's got to revert back to the mean. At some point, we can't allow for these monopolies to just continue taking market share, doing all of these mergers, like basically what Nvidia is doing with CoreWeave. At some point, we've got to stop that because you're just going to keep pushing all the money to the top. And just like back in the 30s. There was rebellions against it. So this was, from my understanding of history, you had the Roaring Twenties, and then you had the Great Depression. And the main part of the Great Depression was that you saw all the money floating to the top, and then you had FDR coming in the 1930s, who was basically a populist leader. So I think probably short term, maybe the next 3 years or so, you could be in the clear if you're buying into Nvidia, but I think long term, like 10, 20, 30 years down the road, when they start cracking down on these monopolies, I think that it could create some trouble for shareholders, would be my guess.
Yeah, and I would agree. Nvidia definitely has a very monopolistic feel to them. They just dominate in every aspect of business, right? Like I think I told you yesterday, they almost matched AMD's revenue alone off of their GPU sales for a quarter, which
Yeah.
is just crazy. Which, because like I mean, I see AMD as maybe not their second competitor, but for me personally, like I do, just with their gaming presence and their chips alone. And I mean, they have a pretty big market cap for the company they are. But
Mm.
it's just Nvidia is just such a larger boat in the water,
Oh yeah.
and I think that companies are feeling the ripples from their movement and are just trying to react because I think a lot of these companies now are just trying to catch up in this arms race to get that market domination, or that market space in cloud-based services or AI computing, whatever it may be.
Mm.
Like when Microsoft said they couldn't even handle the amount of the demand for the AI cloud services. So, like
Yeah.
I said, like Nvidia sees that as a way, or like just another monopoly if they can get the domination early, which they have time and time again.
Yeah. All right. Well, I would say I'm a little bit more bullish. Maybe for the next couple of years, 2, 3 years, I would say. Long term, though, I would not want to be a shareholder in Nvidia, just because of, like I was talking about, the discrepancy between haves, have-nots, and monopolies versus small businesses. I think that there will probably be more crackdowns once we have a leader who's not going to keep pushing us in those two directions.
I definitely would agree with you. I think Nvidia is a buy now stock, and definitely not a hold later. Definitely a sell later,
Mm.
and not just holding it forever and ever and ever. But I definitely do see in the couple of years to come for it to just to keep raising. I didn't know what, like, who knows what Microsoft's market cap will be in a year, or Nvidia's. Maybe a company will hit 4 or 5 trillion
Yeah.
by this time next year. Who knows?
Yeah.
All I can say right now is I'm pretty confident in the stock performing on a month-to-month basis, or even with earnings. If you're holding through earnings, I won't even be worried about it, with just their infrastructure and their pace.
Right. Right. Yeah, I could see it. So, what do you have as a price target for the next 2, 3 years?
2 3 years price target. So with the stock split, uh man, because who knows if there's going to be a war in 2 to 3 years or
Yeah.
something crazy.
Yeah.
There's
Absolutely.
so many things to account for with just how the market operates and reacts to things. But I think it just Nvidia solely performance wise, I could see him at $200,
Mm-hmm.
sometime next year. Or maybe it hits it before then. Who knows? But
Yeah.
I really do think that they will, be eclipsed beyond this $120 stock split only for good.
Yeah. Looks like my stream might have cut. Not getting enough data coming out, but yeah, it was a good talk, and I will catch you maybe in a couple weeks. We'll see.
All right. Thanks for having me here again, guys. And hope y'all enjoyed the content we had provided here for y'all today.
All right. See you, Carl.
See you, Greg.